In January 2025, one US dollar bought you about 700,000 Iranian rials. 1 year later, it bought you over 1.5 million. If you had put your entire life savings into rials, half of it evaporated while you were still deciding what to do with it. Then on February 28, 2026, the United States and Israel bombed Iran. The supreme leader was killed in his own compound. The Strait of Hormuz was shut. Oil hit $120 a barrel. The Philippines declared an energy emergency. And almost nobody is connecting the two stories. This is how one currency quietly collapsed, and the war that walked in after it. This is not a war story. It is a money story that ends in a war. The rial did not just weaken. It was engineered to weaken. The US Treasury Secretary went on live television and said so on the record under oath in front of the Senate. By the time the missiles flew, the economic damage had already been done. And one line from a Treasury hearing explains the whole thing. We will get to that line. Iran has been under some form of American sanctions for most of living memory, but the current round started in 2018 when the United States walked out of the nuclear deal that had for a few years let Iran sell oil and get paid in dollars. Before 2018, one US dollar cost around 42,000 rials. That was the exchange rate. That was the life people were used to. Then sanctions came back. And they came back harder than anyone expected. The way sanctions work in plain language is this. Iran sells oil. Oil is priced in dollars because almost all global oil is priced in dollars. If you stop Iran from selling oil, you stop dollars from flowing in. If you stop dollars from flowing in, Iran cannot pay for anything. It imports medicine machine parts, wheat, rice, fertilizer. And if it still needs to pay its own bills, its central bank has one option left. It prints more rials. More rials chasing the same amount of stuff means every rial is worth less. That is inflation. That is how you get there. By September 2025, the rial was trading at about 900,000 to the dollar. By early December, it crossed 1.2 million for the first time. 2 weeks later, 1.3. A few days after that, 1.4. On December 29th, the head of Iran's central bank resigned. He had taken the job 3 years earlier when $1 cost 430,000 rials. He left with the rial down roughly 70% on his watch, which as resignations go was probably the right call. Now here is where the story turns from bad economics into something stranger. On January 20th, 2026, the US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent flew to Davos, Switzerland for the World Economic Forum. Davos is the place where very wealthy people meet other very wealthy people to agree on what the world's economy should look like. On stage with Fox Business, Bessent was asked about Iran sanctions, and he said something that, if you read carefully, is not really a policy statement. It is a scoreboard. He said the strategy had worked. He said Iran's economy had collapsed in December. He said, and this is the exact line, that if he were an Iranian citizen, he would get his money out of the rial. A sitting US Treasury Secretary on live international television advising the citizens of a foreign country to dump their own currency. Imagine the CEO of Target telling Walmart shoppers to sell their Walmart stock. That is roughly the energy. 2 weeks later, on February 5th, Bessent went to Capitol Hill and said it even more plainly. He was testifying to the Senate Banking Committee. A senator from Alabama asked him about Iran. And Bessent under oath said this, "What we have done is created a dollar shortage in the country." It came to a swift, and I would say grand culmination in December when one of the largest banks in Iran went under. The central bank had to print money. The Iranian currency went into free fall. Grand culmination. That is the phrase. Say it out loud. It is the phrase a chess player uses after winning a tournament, not the phrase a government uses to describe the economic destruction of 93 million people's savings. Now imagine you are an ordinary person in Tehran. You run a shop. You have maybe 50 million rials saved up 2 months ago. That was $60. Now it is 33. Meat costs 3 times what it cost last year. Your landlord wants rent in dollars unofficially because he has stopped trusting the currency his government prints. You switch on the news and you hear that the economic minister in Washington has described your life as a culmination. That is the conditions on the ground. What happened next was predictable, and also what the U.S. appears to have been betting on. People went into the streets. The protests started on December 28, 2025, with shopkeepers in the Grand Bazaar in Tehran. By January, they had spread to 100 cities. 5 million people, according to some estimates, were in the streets at the peak. Iran had not seen a protest that size since 1979, the year the current government was born. The government responded the way it usually does, which is not well. Security forces fired on crowds. The official Iranian Ministry of Health put the death toll at around 30,000 killed by early February 2026. Human rights groups put it even higher. These are not small numbers. These are civil war numbers. And this is where the American posture shifted. Up to this point, it had been an economic campaign. Now, U.S. officials started describing it as something else. President Trump posted publicly that help is on its way for Iranian protesters. He told Iranians, and this is a direct reference to his own statements, to take over your government. The Treasury had broken the economy. The next step, apparently, was to break the regime. By mid-February, U.S. warships and submarines were moving toward the Persian Gulf. Negotiations in Oman, which had been going on in the background, collapsed. American officials later said Iran had been unwilling to give up uranium enrichment. Iranian officials said the U.S. team had misrepresented what Iran had actually offered. Both sides blamed the other. Both sides were also by this point not really negotiating. They were just writing the press release for what came next. And on the morning of February 28th, what came next started dropping out of the sky. The strike was called Operation Epic Fury. It is the kind of name a 12-year-old picks for a video game, but it was not a game. 200 Israeli fighter jets plus USB, 2 stealth bombers, B-1s, and B-52s hit Iranian military sites, missile factories, and command centers in a coordinated wave that began around 6:35 in the morning Tehran time. 10 minutes later, 10 minutes. The Israeli Air Force ran a separate operation targeting what the military calls decapitation strikes, which is a clean word for a very unclean thing. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran since 1989, was killed inside his own residential compound. Several members of his family were killed with him. Ali Larijani, a senior official who had been a key figure in the ongoing U.S.-Iran negotiations, was also killed. A man who, on paper, the U.S. had been talking to was dead by the afternoon. Iran's response was immediate and wide. Around 9 in the morning, local time Iranian ballistic missiles launched toward Israeli cities and toward 5 U.S. bases in the Gulf region: Al Udeid in Qatar, Ali Al Salam in Kuwait, Al Dhafra in the UAE, the U.S. Navy 5th Fleet headquarters in Bahrain. Bahrain turned on its air raid sirens. Explosions were reported at Kuwait International Airport and at Abu Dhabi. Saudi Arabia confirmed strikes on Riyadh. And then, Iran did the one thing that moves the entire global economy at once. On March 4th, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard declared the Strait of Hormuz closed. Here is why that sentence matters. The Strait of Hormuz is a stretch of water between Iran and Oman about 21 miles wide at its narrowest. Around 20% of the world's seaborne oil trade passes through it every single day, roughly 20 million barrels. Qatar ships most of its liquefied natural gas through it. Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Iraq, and the UAE use it as their main route to customers in Asia. If you close it really close, it not just threatened to you have removed 1/5 of the world's oil supply from the market in a single decision. The market reaction was instant. Brent crude, which had been in the 80s, jumped past $120 a barrel within days. Qatar Energy, which runs the largest LNG plant on Earth, declared force majeure on every one of its export contracts. which is a legal term that means essentially an act of God is stopping us. Do not sue us. Over the following weeks, Saudi, Emirati, Kuwaiti, and Iraqi oil production collectively dropped by about 10 million barrels per day. Not because the oil was not in the ground, but because there was nowhere to put it. Storage tanks filled up. Ships could not leave. The whole Persian Gulf turned into a parking lot. And then it came for everyone else. U.S. gas prices hit $4 a gallon at the pump. Pakistan and the Philippines cut their work week to 4 days to save fuel. Bangladesh sent university students home early. The Philippines on March 24th became the first country in the world to declare a national energy emergency tied directly to this war. The head of the International Energy Agency called it, and this is the official description, the greatest global energy security challenge in history. All of it tracing back in a straight line to a currency collapse that a Treasury Secretary had described in a Senate hearing as a grand culmination. On April 8, 2026, the US and Iran agreed to a 2-week ceasefire mediated by Pakistan. Within weeks, that ceasefire had been violated by both sides repeatedly in ways that would look like a full war if a full war were not what came right before it. The strait was partially reopened for ships from 5 countries: China, Russia, India, Iraq, Pakistan, which is a fancy way of saying almost everyone except the people we are mad at. The deeper damage, though, is the kind that does not show up in a ceasefire document. Qatar's largest LNG plant took damage that the owner says will take up to 5 years to repair, meaning Europe, which gets roughly 12 to 14% of its natural gas from Qatar through the strait, is now looking at years of higher energy prices, not months. Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, and the UK are all flagged by forecasters as serious recession risks. Interest rate cuts that central banks had been planning are on hold because inflation just got relit by fuel. Bond yields jumped. Household energy bills went up. None of that is in the ceasefire. Inside Iran, the rial, which had been at 1.4 million to the dollar in December, was trading at 1.75 million by mid-war. Meat is a luxury item. 7 million people are reported to be going hungry. A new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, Ali Khamenei's son, has been installed. The man who the American campaign was ostensibly supposed to help remove was replaced by his own child, which is a kind of outcome, but probably not the one that was pitched. And in the financial markets, something else happened that is worth noting before this story is filed away. On 3 separate occasions during the war, March 23rd, April the 7th, and April 17th, very large bets against oil prices were placed on exchanges in the last 15 to 20 minutes before market-moving political announcements came out. The Financial Times investigated. The total across the 3 bets was roughly $2.3 billion. Nobody has been charged. Nobody has been named. The regulators are still deciding what it was. Someone somewhere knew. 3 times. Maybe the true cost of a collapsed currency is not the currency itself. It is that once you prove to the world that you can collapse one, the rest of the story stops being about policy. It becomes about who was holding what and when and who was standing behind them. There is a quiet irony running through this whole thing. Iran's currency started free-falling in earnest in late 2025. Oil prices spiked globally in March 2026. Between those 2 moments, the US Treasury stood in front of Congress and described what it had engineered by name as a culmination. Then the policy it was celebrating kept culminating past the currency, past the protests, past the bombs, and into $4 a gallon gas at a station in Ohio. Economic statecraft, they called it. No shots fired. There were, it turned out, a lot of shots fired. The craziest part is the line Besant used in Davos on live television in January. If he were an Iranian citizen, he said he would take his money out of the rial right now. He was at least the only person giving accurate financial advice that week.